stuck around to listen. We have one more speaker tonight. We have Lloyd Handler, who is running for judge, a last minute candidate coming to speak to us. Let me see. Lloyd, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, fantastic. Let me spotlight you. And yeah, thanks for sticking around. I hope you're interested in bikes. And anyway, the next 5 minutes are yours.
Right. Actually, it was sort of interesting. Like, my bachelor's in science from UC Davis is in environmental policy analysis and planning, and that's just the sort of policy decisions and sort of urban planning that I remember spending some time with. Plus, I live in Westchester, and coincidentally, one of my best friends from home up in the high desert moved to Culver City and lives over on Keystone. And so, especially during the pandemic, when everything was shut down, to get out of the house, I would ride my bike over to his house, and we would sit in lawn chairs 6 feet apart, drinking a beer in the front yard, since you can sort of get away with that in Culver City in the residential neighborhoods. But anyway, a little bit more about myself than that. As I said, I have a BS from UC Davis. I went to law school here in Los Angeles. However, I grew up in the high desert at Ridgecrest and China Lake, where my father was a civilian scientist with the Navy. But we were down here all the time because my grandparents lived down here, and we were probably down in LA once a month or so. Lived right across the street from Culver City for a number of years while I was in law school, over on Vinton, across Venice and Palms. And so since there's nothing in Palms, I was in Culver City quite a bit while I was in law school, and for several years thereafter, until I was able to move downtown when I got a job down there. But anyway, professionally, after law school, I clerked for a U.S. District Court judge here in Los Angeles. And after that, I went to the district attorney's office. I was originally interested in being a member of a new unit they had at the time that specialized on fighting environmental crime, prosecuting people who endangered worker safety, dumped toxic waste down the sewers, that sort of thing. And while in LA, unfortunately, I'd had a number of people close to me who were victims of crime, so I thought I could do street crime prosecution while I developed my trial chops, to be able to have some trial skills for that special unit. But unfortunately, when I was working for Gil Garcetti's DA's office, they had such a hidebound policy manual that, at least where I was working, it was very difficult to deal with instances where, after interviewing the police officers and the witnesses, you had some doubt as to whether people on the prosecution side were being completely truthful or accurate. That sort of discussion went nowhere with my boss at the time. And then frequently, you find that there's some mitigating circumstances with people's specific situations that have brought them before the court. And the woman I was working for wanted me to treat everyone the same, regardless of what they were going through, their situation in life, what had caused them to make a mistake on maybe the worst day of their life. And people I was litigating with against in the public defender's office saw I was sort of troubled by this sort of thing and actively recruited me to interview for the PD's office, which at first I was a little reluctant to, but once I got the job and started it, I realized it was really, really a better fit for me. In addition to the public defender's office, I've also been in private practice for about 4 or 5 years. My wife, before we were married, took a job up in Oakland working for a health policy think tank in Oakland, and I pursued her up there and was sort of tried my hand at being a private lawyer for a while. Found out I was still a good lawyer, but a bad businessman. So when we had kids and had the chance to move back here where we had family, I was happy to fold up my tent and go back to work for the PD's office. Overall, I have 33 years of criminal law experience, both as a prosecutor and a defense lawyer. And in fact, of all the candidates currently running for judge this cycle, I actually have more trial experience than any of them. I've been handling capital cases since 2008. In 2002, I was certified by the state bar as a certified specialist in criminal law. But why I'm running is unusual compared to the other candidates. One of the things that has happened in Los Angeles County and California, to various extents in other parts of the country, is that people are realizing that you can't incarcerate your way out of our criminal justice problems. And that although there are some people who are dangerous, some people who have done something so bad, they actually need to be incarcerated as punishment to bring justice to the victims and the people injured. The vast majority of cases are sort of in the middle, where a judge has the discretion to send someone to prison or to grant probation under certain terms and circumstances and conditions. And a lot of times people get into the habit, both as prosecutors, judges, and sometimes even defense lawyers, of looking at a charge, someone with a certain age, a certain record, and assuming that certain people just need to go to prison for the standard amount of time. I really think a judge has to look at people as individuals and see if it can be determined, sometimes by giving the defense the resources they need to have mental health professionals evaluate their clients. Sometimes it's just a matter of giving the lawyers time to fully investigate their client's background and not insist on the case being resolved early when the defense needs more time to sort out what is making their client tick. But once that's determined, I think a judge has to be willing to take some risks and figure out if a person can be rehabilitated, if he has problems that can be addressed with the resources of the court, the probation department, helping bring other parties in the system to coordinate the person's services. And so we consequently have drug courts, we have a number of mental health courts, we have courts just for veterans where I have issues relating to their service, we have issues relating for women. The Women's Reentry Court deals with women who have basically ended up in a life of crime due to what's frequently childhood sexual abuse or neglect or abuse physically or sexually as young women. And so that's sort of the wave of the future, because in these middle ground cases, you can send someone to prison for 2, 3, or 4 or 5 years. The Department of Corrections has them do half that time, and then they're going to be out again relatively quickly with no real rehabilitative resources expended on them in the state prison system, where they're just sort of warehousing people and trying to keep prison gangs from killing each other and injuring guards, with right rehabilitation taking a way distant back seat in the back of the bus. Instead, if a judge is willing to take some risks and also minimize those risks by personally being involved in monitoring the person on probation, we have an opportunity to sort of deal with the problem at its source and bring people back into productive members of society. And over the years, I've been in LA County long enough at this point that a couple times a year, I'll get a call out of the blue from someone I represented 3, 5, sometimes 10 years ago, who will call me and reach out and talk about the effects of being in a drug program or having to be involved with mental health counseling to deal with getting beyond the trauma they suffered as a young person or child, and how to tell me how their life is going better. Now, every once in a while, that won't work out, and someone might reoffend. They might just prove incapable of complying with the terms of probation, and then you have to do something else with them. But I think it's best to try if you think that there really is a chance of rehabilitating someone, because if someone's just going to come right out again, they're usually the worse for wear, more damaged. If they've learned anything, it's usually how to commit more sophisticated crimes and get away with it. And that doesn't really make us safer. Whereas rehabilitating someone and getting them back to not just paying taxes and working, but all of these people are usually someone's family members. You know, they're their parents, their aunts and uncles, their siblings, and they all have a role to play, even if they may not necessarily go on to be, you know, physicians or Nobel Prize winners within their family. There are people who depend on even some of my clients who you would think to look at, you know, may have least to offer. There's usually someone out there who, when the person was whole, before they were mentally ill, before they were a drug addict, you know, actually relied on them in some way. Sometimes it's just a parent relying on a child's companionship in their old age, as opposed to having them in and out of prison on the installment plan. So the reason I'm running, however, even though I like my job as a public defender and I'm actually quite good at it, and I think I make a difference where I'm at, is some of the judges are just not amenable to this. And I chose to run against David Gelfand, who's the site judge at his particular location, which means he's sort of the managerial person who sets some of the ground rules for that court. And he's been resistant to expanding the one court that deals, courtroom that deals with people with mental health and drug problems in his court. And even though there are provisions within the local rules of court to transfer cases from one courthouse that doesn't have a particular rehabilitative or collaborative court, such as a veterans court or a office of diversion or reentry court for homeless, mentally ill people, that there are rules that allow the transfer of these cases from one court to another to take advantage of these programs. And he's basically set up roadblocks to doing that, both in terms of not allowing people to leave his own particular courtroom, but basically not encouraging or setting up identifiable processes by which the other judges in his court can easily send these court cases to other courts where they could be handled more appropriately, instead actually sort of supporting them in their resistance. So although there are some other judges I've had issues with, other judges that you can tell on the bench that they used to be a former prosecutor because of how they treat the prosecution versus the defense and the defendants themselves. He has a broader, more pernicious influence in the area where he holds court than individual judges who might have given me grief or my colleagues grief in other places. So the County Bar Association that rates judges have rated me as qualified in terms of having experience in the judicial temperament. I'm not, well, I can't comment on the issues with the current district attorney. You can refer how I might stand on some of those positions. But his election has made me really aware that a number of judges who used to say that they couldn't do things that the defense was requesting to help their clients become rehabilitated because the district attorney's policy was against them, they couldn't go against the DA. I have noted some of these judges, especially judges like Judge Gelfand, all of a sudden, now that they don't like what the DA would like to do, they feel that, well, I don't have to listen to the DA, I can do what I want. So the election of George Gascon and the reaction to him among the bench has really sort of exposed some of the hypocrisy among some of the judges who really actually were former old school prosecutors and for many important factors essentially are still filling that same role in the courtroom despite supposedly being neutral. So I'm occasionally asked at various forums that there's an assumption that a public defender is going to be biased in favor of the defense. Being a defense attorney, at least being a public sector one that's a repeat player in the same court and sees the same people day after day, you realize that you have to adhere to an ethical standard of following all the rules because all you have is your reputation. And so I've been essentially very seriously self-policing my own ethics in terms of what's required of me in my current role. And I think shifting to a judicial role where one's role is not to be an advocate, but to simply be the best umpire one can and treat everyone fairly. I hope that when I become a judge, people who don't know me and don't know my backstory will be able to sit perhaps as a juror, maybe one of you, or just a litigant, a person accused, or as a family member accused, or someone who's been victimized by someone in the street, but they won't have any idea whether I was a defense lawyer or a prosecutor because of the way I treat everyone the same.
Great.
So
I'm sorry to cut you off, but that is.
Well, that's about all I have to say, unless you have questions.
Thank you for coming to visit us. We do have to get into the business part of our meeting now, but please tell us which office you're running for. I know we can look it up, but
number 116. I'm the only Democrat. It's just me against the Republican former district attorney Judge Gelfand.
Great. Well, it was good to meet you, and since you're local, I hope you'll join up with the club. I don't know if you'll be allowed to once you're a judge, but one way or another, we look forward to seeing you again.
Well, I very much appreciate that offer because the Westminster Club is somewhat in disarray, as you may have heard. But thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.
See you around.
Thank you.
So